Chaos has taken over our planet. The world is at war, and it is up to us to defeat the evil entity that is behind it. We must battle through behemoth structures and make it known to this world that we will not back down. In these next 100 days, we will build the civilization to rival that of the nations that would see me dead. We will fight through their strongholds, collect their precious items, and take down their leaders. Whilst adventuring, we must make a decision: to bow to the gods and pay tribute, or to stand toe-to-toe with the Greek mythological beings. We have one life, many bosses to face, and limited time. Can I survive these next 100 days of pure adventuring? Only time will tell. Let's begin. Today, Wednesday, April 28th at 8 p.m. EST, we will be doing a charity stream playing modded Minecraft. The money we raise we will use to make a video on the new vlog channel and give it to people in need. The stream will be on Mudflaps, but the video will be on the vlog channel. The link is in the description. As I spawned into a brand new world, excited to take on the new challenges, I saw a giant ship in the sky. That's definitely something we're going to have to go and check out later. While I was breaking the log on this tree, I noticed that the tree had some sort of new animation on it. And as I continued breaking it, all of a sudden a pillager appeared. But it wasn't a pillager, it was simply just an achievement about a pillager. No idea why that popped up, and I have no idea what it does, but we'll have to find out later. As I kept on breaking down the tree, I realized that you break down the logs more and more, eventually the tree entirely collapses. This is a really cool add-on. I then began exploring. This entire mod pack is based off of adventure and exploring. There's no really sitting still. When I went to the mines to grab some cobblestone, I knew I couldn't go into the depths yet because there were monsters and different bosses that it held within. Mining was not the normal mining you have in Minecraft. I then continued adventuring and I found a hobbit hole, and I proceeded to steal his bed. I then mercilessly killed this little piglet's parents. Hopefully nobody saw that, because if you kill too many passive animals, everything starts attacking you. But I'm sure that would be fine, right? I then found my first sign of life. It was almost like a dock, only it was in the middle of the terrain, and I went to investigate it. I began looting all the chests and all the valuable items inside. There were some great starter items in here, but there didn't seem to be anybody around, and I didn't know why. As the night approached, I found my first villager. When I went to talk to him, he just ignored me and didn't want to trade with me or acknowledge me. I guess he doesn't like me very much, but I'm not exactly sure why. The next day, I crafted a set of iron armor and I went out adventuring. Whilst adventuring, I noticed a giant-like dungeon. I knew this was the dungeon from Ice and Fire, but we would need a key to get in there, and I was definitely not ready for it. And then in the distance, I noticed a cyclone-like thing attacking the moose, so I charged in to defend them. It turns out they killed it, and I accidentally hit a moose, angered him, and I sprinted away. I wouldn't say this is an ideal situation, but I think I did my part. I then discovered a temple-like object made out of ice. I wasn't sure if there was loot in here, but I'll be darned if I wasn't going to find out. So I entered inside. I began being shot by bows and arrows, but I fought my way through, and I looted the chests that I could. There was some pretty decent loot in there as well, but I knew there were much bigger structures in this world to find, and oh boy was I excited. I then got my revenge on another tornado-like object, and I began attacking him. He threw me around, lightning bolted me, but I was able to take him down. He didn't drop any loot, but I felt accomplished nonetheless. I began the next day by crafting a shield. I was going to make my way into an illager camp and begin taking on the illagers. From what I understood in this world, the illagers and villagers were at war, but there were many more illagers and a lot more bosses within them than there are in the usual game. To gain the trust of the villagers is important because they're going to help you unlock new tools, understand how Poseidon and Hades rule the under and overworld, and just get a grasp on this world so I can begin adventuring. And apparently, I also have to learn from them how to fight the Ender Dragon, because there's a unique way on how this entire game works, and I'm very excited to find out. But to do that, I had to kill as many illagers as I could, so I began here. I found an enormous tower in the wild, and I was going to storm it, until everything came out and began attacking me, and I realized I was not prepared for this. So I quickly ran away to gather my ground, and try and figure out if I wanted to take on this tower, or if I wanted to continue adventuring. I decided that if I could take out the pillagers that were around the tower, I'd have a much better chance. So I began dismembering them from all of their parts, and then venturing to a mine I noticed that was next to the tower. Inside of the mine there were more pillagers, but I was able to take them out and loot the chests. Now it was time to take on the Mega Tower. I had no idea if I was going to be able to do it, but I'll be darned if I'm not going to try. I then attempted to bridge some peace with the villagers by throwing emeralds on the ground, but I was quickly chased out by their guards. They wanted none of that. This meant I had to kill more illagers if I wanted to be at peace with the villagers and begin learning the secrets of this new world. As I entered the first floor, I was approached by many illagers shooting at me with their enchanted crossbows, but I fought my way through and made it up to the second floor. On the second floor, there were some dead illagers that were walking around as skeletons. I dismembered their bones and I looted the chests, and then I made my way to the top. The next day I continued venturing up the tower, looting the rooms and taking on the mobs as I went. They were getting stronger and stronger, and I was getting scared of what might be at the top. When I reached a ledge, I peered out and I was like, nope, not going down there. Whatever was guarding the top room seemed to have vanished, because when I got up there it was completely empty. But that's okay, I would just steal all their items anyway. It seemed to be a lot of crafting ingredients, which wasn't too useful at the moment, but later when I faced dragons, I knew the fire-breathing potions would be very useful. I attempted to mine some of the valuable blocks, but because the tower inflicts mining fatigue 3 on you, there's no possibility you can get them. I then found this man's pet doggo. I'm not quite sure why he was so scared of me. Every time I tried to give him pats, he just headbutted me, so I left him alone. After I was notified that the guards would no longer kill me because of the amount of illagers I had killed, I ventured to the village. In fact, none of them did kill me, which was great, but the villagers still didn't want to talk to me. I then noticed a floating purple orb. I wasn't quite sure what it was or if it was dangerous, but I decided that the best idea would be to approach it. As I ventured closer, the guards began taking out the little outputs that it was putting on the ground. I'm not exactly sure what they were, but I didn't want to touch them. I then found a strange animal with his head plowed into the snow. It looked quite uncomfortable. I then noticed some road signs that said something was 400 blocks in a certain direction. Rather than following them immediately, I decided to venture closer to the dangerous mobs who began attacking me, and then I decided to follow the road signs after that. I have no idea what was 400 blocks that way because I found absolutely nothing, so I kept on venturing out. I wanted to establish a home base, and in this way I could begin putting my supplies down and really begin adventuring and seeing what this world was made of. While venturing through the wild, I noticed a statue of Poseidon. This man rules the sea, and I had two choices. I could keep him angry at me and clash with the titan he is, or I could pay tribute to him, and then he would let me into the sea without attacking me every time. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do yet, so I just left it be for now. Next day, while venturing, I saw this ginormous tower in the distance, and I thought the best idea would be to approach it and see what it was made of. As I approached the behemoth of a structure, I noticed even more illagers and pillagers inside, and they began to chase me. I definitely was not equipped for this. I tried to take them on, but in the end, ended up leaving. I needed stronger gear before I found out what was held atop of this tower. That night, I found a small cabin that was infiltrated by skeletons, so I removed them all from existence, and then I looted the chests inside. The next day, I found a nice little village and a nice little biome, and I decided this would be the new home for me. So I began gathering some wood and supplies so I could begin the construction of my new behemoth structure. Whilst collecting some wood, I was attacked by more pillagers and they brought me down to half a heart. But with my wits and my shield, I was able to regain my strength, eat up some food, heal, and then I took them down and I began gathering wood once again. As soon as I completed my first structure, I put all of my items into some chests so I could go out adventuring some more and collect some more valuable items. This game is centered around exploration, so if I wanted better armor and better weaponry, I knew I was going to have to venture into some bigger structures. Before adventuring the next day, I wanted to make sure I had enough supplies. I started out by gathering a bit more wood, and then I found these mystery eggs, but apparently they don't spawn anything, so they're quite mysterious if you ask me. I then began my adventure out of the small town into the wide open terrain. I had no idea what awaited me in this expansive world, but I knew whatever it was, I would conquer it, and I would become the new ruler of this land, as I rose to glory in front of the villagers and all mankind. I then began a ginormous climb up this very tall tower. One slip and I would plummet to my death, so I had to be very careful. Once I got to the top, I looted the chest that was up there. There was no boss there, thankfully, as I wasn't sure if I would be able to take him on with the armor I had, but I was very grateful for the loot it gave me. I then gathered a bit more food and continued adventuring. When I swam across a small body of water, I got the weakness effect. This was Poseidon's doing, and I was not very happy with him. If he thinks I'm going to pay tribute to him, he's got another thing coming. Find me his dungeon, and we'll settle things there. In the distance, I noticed a Colosseum-like structure. Nothing bad ever happens in Colosseums, right? So I decided to adventure in. It turns out very bad things happen in Colosseums, and I was immediately attacked by everything inside. I fought my way through, and investigated to see if there was any loot. None to be found, but I claimed victory over the ancient Colosseum. When I say victory, I mean that I left. Nobody is fighting skeletons mounted on phantoms flying around in diamond enchanted armor. I'm sorry, but that is not a mob I ever want to witness again. I then found a little hobbit hole in which I was going to sleep for the night, but it wasn't letting me sleep, and I didn't know why. I then went outside to see if anything might be stopping me, and sure enough, there was a giant Enderman. Well, the Enderman himself wasn't that giant, but his eye was freaking huge. I decided that I would take him on. He was much stronger than a normal Enderman, but I was able to defeat him. I then tried sleeping again, but again it would not let me sleep. So I went outside and I found another one. I slaughtered him, and then it enabled me to sleep. I wasn't sure why these guys kept you from sleeping, but I bet it was going to play into something later. Continued on with my adventure the next day, finding small camps with pillagers, looting everything they had inside, and dismantling their heads from their bodies. I was after the big boys though. These little structures weren't enough for me. I wanted the main bosses, and I wanted them now. With my iron armor, I could take them on. After hearing an explosion, I thought the best idea would be to run directly towards it. So I did so. While running, I found a small structure. I decided to investigate what was inside. There were many evil creatures inside, but I was able to defeat them with my axe in hand. But everybody was growing stronger and I was not. I needed to find a way to get better armor or I wouldn't be able to take on the tougher mobs in this game. Next day, I decided to venture down into the mines. This mod pack had curated the mines in a way I'd never seen before. With different monsters and different ways to explore, this was going to be crazy. Whilst in the mines, I came across many hostile creatures, but I was able to survive and continue exploring. I love whatever is making this terrain look like this. The pillars that are holding up the cave and just the whole dynamic is so cool, and I can't wait to see what bosses and loot lie below the surface. Near the end of my mining trip, I ran into this extremely strong zombie. Thankfully, he barely had any health left when I found him. He just wouldn't die. I began shooting him with crossbow bolts after crossbow bolt, but he just would not perish. But eventually, we struck him down and we defeated him. If he is not even a boss, what are the bosses going to be like? I have no idea what happened, and I don't think I want to know. I knew underground there were different bosses I could face, but I also knew with iron armor I didn't stand much of a chance against them. So I decided just to stay on the outside, mine some ores, and just get a good grip on what the underground looks like. Upon re-emerging to the surface, I was greeted by this young fellow. I decided to try out my dagger and see if it was any good. Upon striking him and killing him, it unlocked a new skill. I could now dual wield weapons. This was going to be overpowered when I had good enough swords to do it with. I then crafted some bread and began doing some research on the next step in the mod. I knew I needed to learn how to face some of the bosses and how to get to hell and face Hades. But to do that I had to start befriending the villagers. So I used that knowledge to begin my quest to befriend them. However, to do that, I knew I was going to need some more emeralds, so I ventured out and I began slaying mobs in every way I could find. Hopefully the chests and killing enough villagers would give me enough emeralds that I could begin trading with the villagers and begin unlocking their secrets to this world. I then ventured to these strange creatures' camp. I knew I dare not attack them as they were friends of the villagers, and angering them would anger the villagers and I needed to make peace with them. So I let them be for now and let them enjoy their little song and dance. I continued looting for the rest of the day. I really wanted to find a large structure with a lot of floors and a lot of mobs inside. That I feel would hold the most loot. But finding them was not so easy. The biggest structures were the rarest, and although they held the loot I needed, I wasn't positive I could take them on yet. Whilst traveling the next day, I encountered this giant monster. I attempted to run, but to no avail. He was chasing me. So I turned around and I began to fight him. I wasn't sure how strong he was, but I wasn't exactly sure I wanted to find out either. But I took him on, and I was able to defeat him. These mobs are absolutely crazy, and once we get to the higher levels, I can't imagine what they're going to do. I then noticed that the raccoon had picked up some of the meat, so I tested something out and I threw him some bread, and sure enough he grabbed it and began munching down. This is the cutest thing I've ever seen. I really wanted to take him home as a pet, but he wouldn't follow me. So I left him there with a little bit more bread. I then noticed in the distance a small tower. I decided I would venture towards it and see what loot it had to offer. I ventured to the top and I looted the chest. There were no mobs to speak of though, which is quite strange. Most of these towers are inhabited by evil beings, with the top having the strongest of all. But I was okay with that because I knew there'd be tons more where that came from. The next day I encountered a stray pillager. I took him out, and then I moved towards a giant grain tower of sorts, or a windmill. As I got inside, I realized this was no ordinary windmill, as it was full of evil mobs, with I knew good loot at the top to be held. So I fought my way through it, and I eventually got to the top and looted the chests. The loot was pretty good, but I knew there was more. I knew above me was a giant ship, so I decided I would pillar up to it and see what it had to offer as well. I knew these ships had some epic loot on them, but I also knew they were quite dangerous and I wasn't sure if I could take them on yet. And sure enough, midway through pillaring up, a ghast shot at me, of all things a ghast, and blew me all the way down and I barely survived. I figured at this point, if there's going to be at least ghasts up there, I'm probably not ready for it, so I decided to venture elsewhere, but I would return when I was strong enough. Whilst traveling that night, I noticed a stray Medusa, which is quite odd because she has her own dungeon. If you look her directly in the eyes, she will turn you to stone. So I knew I had to be very careful. So I stared at the ground while I attacked, and I was able to take her out. I then ventured into her dungeon, but I found no loot. I knew her head could be used for some sort of advantage, but I couldn't remember what. So I decided to count my victories and move on. Whilst traveling the next day, I noticed a giant village pop up right in front of me. Or should I say a city pop up right in front of me. Before venturing in though, I went to the local mine to see what they were doing. I took out the pillagers inside, but I couldn't figure out why they were mining so deep. What were they looking for? I then tried to venture into the city, but I was immediately chased out by very hostile mobs that I was definitely not ready to fight yet. I really wanted to see what loot that city had, but I knew if I went in, it was a death trap. So I decided to venture off for now, but I would return. I have no idea what the heck I was doing here. All it says in my notes is worm. Scary worm. I then found another one of the pillagers' bases, so I decided I was going to take it out and get all the loot for myself. It was a little bit tricky, and I almost died a few times, but thankfully my new crossbows and my shield were able to keep me safe. I mowed down the pillagers inside and looted them for everything that they had. I then continued venturing through the camp, dismantling mobs as I went. I found a secret underground area, so I went down to investigate. But inside there wasn't too much good loot, mainly just some mobs. But I made sure to dismantle all of them from their bodies and take the loot that I could. And then I ventured away looking for new stuff to loot and what the world had to offer for me. I returned home the following day. I knew it was time to start trading with the villagers. You see, once you level the villagers up, certain ones can give you different knowledges on the world. Some will give you knowledge on boss locations, some will give you knowledge on how to use better weapons. Some of the weapons in this game are actually gated, and to get to them, you need to have enough notoriety, and you need to have enough knowledge to be able to use them. I began by leveling up the easiest villager I could, the farmer. I had a lot of wheat, and I had a lot of emeralds at the moment, so I figured he'd be the easiest to level up. But once I got him all the way to a friend, I ran out of emeralds, and I had to seek a new idea. I knew that the armorer, once he was level up, would drop me a special item that would allow me to tame Hades, or at least give tribute to Hades, so I could go to the depths of the Nether, where there was tons more dungeons to go and investigate. There's no way I could go there before I paid tribute to Hades, otherwise he would definitely kill me as soon as I entered. So I had to figure out how to pay tribute, but to do so, I'd need to max out an armorer to get there. I decided to venture out again on a quest for more emeralds. I knew if I wanted to get the armorer to max level so I could investigate how to pay tribute to Hades, I would need a lot more emeralds. Whilst investigating, I found a tiny village, another one of the riverfront villages that I had found at the very start of the game. Only this one had a room with all the emeralds the villagers had been hoarding. And I made sure to borrow some. I'm sure I returned them later. At first I thought this was the villager, but apparently it's just a cute little blob and I really like it, and I named him Gerald. When I was home the next day, I made an enchanting table. I knew I was going to have to start clearing out terrain, Because you see, to use the higher level armor and tools within the game, you need a high notoriety. But to get a high notoriety, you need to be running a colony. So I needed to begin terraforming the land so I could start a colony and begin my quest towards lordship. After doing some terraforming, I placed down a town hall. This wouldn't build anything at the moment, but it would attract people to come to me and join my colony. And once they joined, I could recruit them as builders, give them food, and begin starting an empire to rival that of the Illagers and take them on. I then placed down the schematic for what would eventually be my town hall, and then it became nothing. And then I began terraforming some more, as I knew I would need a lot larger of an area when the settlers began showing up. And then I found a villager that had no trade, so I threw down a blast furnace and he turned into an armorer. An armorer is exactly the man that I need for him to drop the knowledge on how to face Hades. I think, anyway. This mod pack has absolutely no direction, you kind of have to figure it out as you go. But I was given a hint that the armorer is the villager you need to level up. So I began wasting all of my emeralds to get some iron gear. This man is a ripoff. Eventually, I was able to get him all the way up to friend, but I needed to get him 1 or 2 more levels. But at this level, he gave me some insanely good chest plates. I didn't have enough emeralds to afford them yet, though, but this is definitely what I wanted to go for. And then boom, just like that, settlers had arrived, and I had my builder-constructor builder's hut. Before I build the town hall, I need the builder's hut built so that I have a builder. That makes sense, right? It was time for another adventure. I wanted to begin taking on some bigger structures, so I brought a backpack with me this time so I could hold all the loot I would get. I spent most of the day traveling, ignoring the smaller structures, waiting for that one large place to go and loot. But whilst adventuring, I saw this large platypus-like sea creature. This thing was absolutely massive. I knew if I touched it, I'd probably die, so I decided the best option was to venture off. So much late game stuff to do, but I just am not ready for it yet. The next day, I found a tower in the middle of the plains, and I decided to investigate. The first floor had some loot, but I was suspicious after hearing noises above me, so I approached the top floors, and sure enough, the dead were waiting for me. As I fought my way through, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to survive. These guys pack a punch, especially when you're poisoned. You have no idea when you're going to drain all of your health, and you'll just be dead, and it'll just be not a fun time. But I fought my way through, and I made my way to the top, dismantling mob by mob, and eventually I got to loot the chests, and there was some pretty good loot inside. I knew these towers just scratched the surface. I knew there were massive structures inside of the game with crazy bosses and loot, and I was preparing for them. I found yet another pillager outpost and I took it down. These were becoming too easy. I knew soon I'd have to venture up to the airships and begin taking on the foes up there to get better gear. You don't really craft armor in this game, you really have to find it. And I knew those airships would hold some good loot, but I also knew they were quite dangerous. But soon enough, we'd be strong enough to venture up there. Near the end of the day, I found a jungle village. Apparently it was a lost civilization, but when I right-clicked on any of the villagers, none of them had trades, so I'm not quite sure why it's a lost civilization or why it's useful, but maybe that'll come in handy later. I then saw a dungeon, and I approached with caution because I knew what terrors were held within inside. So I used my crossbow and I stayed at distance, because if I got too close to that thing, he would one-shot me. I had to kill all the legends in this pack before I could unlock the Ender Dragon, and I didn't know if he was going to be a legend, but Medusa was a legend, so I was hoping he would be one too. It turns out, however, he was not. Finding these 7 legends are definitely going to be difficult, but we're going to need to do it to beat the game. I began the next day by putting on my brand new armor set. This thing looks amazing. And then I began working on my builders. If I wanted to expand to make a town hall and have my city grow larger and larger, I was going to need a lot of resources. So I began planting saplings so that soon they would grow and I could take them down. I then managed to balance a tree on my head. I'm a strong man. My goal for the next day was to max out the armorer, because once I maxed him out, he would give me the next clue on how to defeat this world. Eventually, after maxing him out, he gave me a book, and as I began to read, the book didn't make a lot of sense. I was supposed to go to a pyramid to summon something. I didn't know what kind of pyramid it was though. Was it a normal Minecraft pyramid, or were there other pyramids inside of the game? Because most likely, the Minecraft pyramid's actually called a temple, so I wouldn't necessarily think that's a pyramid. But then again, who knows? We'll have to try it in that temple as well, but he might be talking about a different pyramid to summon this guy. I have no idea who he is or why I want to summon him, but I want to defeat him because that seems like a pog thing to do. I spent the rest of the day gathering some resources so I could max out the farmer. I still hadn't got the book on Hades yet. The Nether had to be our next adventure, but I couldn't go there until I had eased Hades up, and he didn't want to kill me. So I spent the rest of the day leveling up the farmer, and eventually he gave me another book. But this one was not for Hades. This was for another adventure. Apparently, I needed these cursed chests, and when I'd accumulated 15, I could get a mystery box. And from there, I could get a key that summons a dark evil. This sounded very interesting. The next day, I decided I was going to go adventuring. So I grabbed the chestplate from the armorer. This chestplate would inflict lightning bolts on people that attacked me. I knew it would be the best protection I could get. And then I began on my adventure. While out, I found a statue of Hades, and I let him know who was coming for him soon. Whilst adventuring, I found this shipwreck with a sailor that was trapped in the sea. But while looking around, I found nothing of value, so I decided to move on. The next day, I found this massive structure. I decided I was ready to take it on, and immediately, all the pillagers rushed out, and I began taking them on the ground. I couldn't even get near the structure yet. There were too many of them, and they were too powerful. So I took them out one by one, and eventually, by the end of the day, I made my way into the structure and began working my way up the floors. I knew if the mobs were this tough, the loot must be good. I spent the whole next day continuing to invade the tower. This was tough, and I had to take a few steps back throughout it, otherwise I would surely die. It's hard because if you get the wrong Inferno, he can actually take your armor off you, and at that point, if you're shot by one of those bows, you're done. So I had to be very cautious and keep an eye on my armor bar as I went through. But the loot inside of these chests were definitely worth it. This would help me a lot going forward. If I was going to begin taking on bosses soon, and begin countering the lore inside of this mod pack, I was going to need much better stuff, and this was going to be a great start. I had heard that inside of this mod pack, there's a type of armor you can get with an enchant on it, and it actually makes illagers scared of you. So I'll be able to walk through these towers and just take everything without them attacking me. But to get this enchanted armor, it is said that you need to kill one of the titans of bosses, the legendaries. I didn't know which one, but I was ready for it, and I wanted it as soon as possible. The next day, I decided that I was ready to raid one of the airships. So I gathered a bunch of dirt as I knew I would need to pillar up to it. I knew I would have to stay a safe distance away, because if I was too close, the ghasts would spawn, and they would blow up the tower I was pillaring on. I didn't have a water bucket in my hotbar right now, and that was a mistake, because if I fell, I would most likely die. But I decided to pog champ it and give it a go. After taking out the crew that was sitting on the wing, I began taking out the crew that was inside of the ship, but there were far too many of them. But I found out that if I stayed on the ledge and attacked them from there, they couldn't touch me, and I'd be able to kill them all. However, with the amount of armor they were wearing, this was going to take a while. I may or may not have decided to burn down the ship the next day. This would give me easy access to all the chests, and stop the spawners from spawning. Every mob that spawned was immediately just dropped to the ground, and this was great. Inside of the chest, I found some nether ender eyes. This wouldn't be useful for now, but later in the game, you'll see how important these things are. After looting the ship, I returned to the ground and I found all the mobs that had been spawning. They were right there. I decided the best idea was to valiantly retreat as fast as possible. Whilst exploring the next day, I met this very ugly man that I disposed of with my sword. I never wanted to see him again. And then I crafted a nature's compass and began my voyage to the ominous woods. This is where the cursed chests were held, and this is where I would find my next step in the game. Nothing really happened the next day, it was just a lot of traveling, but I did run across this roguelike dungeon. I had heard that this mod had a pretty big overhaul for 1.16, and I was pretty excited to venture in. But for now, my task was the ominous woods, so I ventured on. The next day was even more traveling as I got even closer to the ominous woods. I found some beautiful biomes like this lavender one, and I found some interesting mobs that I'm not quite sure what they were wearing. A lot of them had custom structures around, but I decided for now I would leave them alone, as I really wanted to find the ominous woods and begin my first quest towards my first boss. As I drew closer to the ominous woods, I found another one of these Japanese-style homes. These things are absolutely beautiful, and I'd love to live in one, except for the fact that I'm sure there's tons of hostility to be had inside. I knew I'd have to take one of these on soon, but for now, the Ominous Woods was my only desire. And then, on day 37, we arrived at the Ominous Woods. To find what I needed, I was going to need to find a graveyard. Inside the graveyard were these cursed chests. I needed to pick one up. Well, I needed to pick 15 of them up, so I had to figure out a better way to do this. But I wanted to see what they looked like and how hard they were to get. Every time you open a chest, a ghost spawns and tries to kill you. So the best way to do this is to simply break it on your first go and collect what's ever inside. I decided to try and do a little grave robbing to see if there was any more chests or ectoplasm around, but it turns out there was not. I needed to figure out a faster way to collect these chests, as I was not going to go to 15 different ominous forest biomes to find them. The next day I began work on a theory. I knew there were graveyards that spawned outside of the ominous forest biome, so I decided to go and see if they held cursed chests as well, and it turns out that they did. Between the cursed chests and the ectoplasm which can craft cursed chests, I knew I'd only need to find a few more, and then I would have enough to craft all the chests I would need. Whilst traveling the next day to find more graveyards, I noticed what looked like a battle tower, only it was smaller and slightly different. I decided to see what loot was held inside. As I made my way up, I found no resistance, just loot inside of the tower. I wasn't quite sure why this tower was constructed like this, and I wanted to know what was on the top. Whilst looting, I found a dungeon map. This would be fun to investigate later. And then I made my way to the top. However, there was nothing there. Just a piece of nether brick on a lot of golden blocks. I decided, well, it would make sense if you lit the nether brick on fire to summon something, so I went and made a flint and steel, and I lit it on fire. But nothing happened. I wasn't quite sure if I was doing this right, but I decided just to leave with my loot and count my blessings. I continued for the next few days looking for graveyards. I found some more illagers that had managed to escape their prison of a home, and they attacked me, but I made my way out, and then I found an ice dragon. And I thought to myself, the smart thing to do would be to walk away, because why would you try and fight this thing? And then I decided, I wonder how much damage my crossbow does. So I gave it a shot. It doesn't do enough. Run away, run away. On day 42, I found my last graveyard. This, I believed, would be enough to make the mystery box. So I began my quest home. I returned home on day 44, but I didn't really know what I was doing. After sorting my items away, I tried to figure out what I was supposed to do with the 15 chests. It didn't really give me any instruction. So I decided the best thing to do would be to craft them. And once I crafted them, it automatically put the mystery chest into my inventory. It said I was supposed to give it 1 diamond, but I wasn't quite sure how to do that. After placing the mystery chest down, I clicked on it, and a bunch of things spawned. I gave the being a diamond, and in exchange, he gave me a drop of ichor. I'm not quite sure what this is used for yet, but apparently this mystery box can drop a bunch of different things. I wasn't sure how to get the key that would unlock the new boss, but I figured for now I needed more information, so I'd need to trade with some more villagers. The next day I began gathering some more supplies. I wanted to begin expanding my mine colonies. As soon as I had more builders, more houses, I would have more fame, and I'd be able to use the epic items inside of the game and to begin taking on the legendaries and then delve into the Nether. I used some very safe tactics to remove the homes, and then I used my shovel to remove all the dirt. You need a great big flat land because once these buildings expand to higher tiers, they use up a lot of space. I met this man who cast blue fireballs at me. I decided to dispose of him as I wasn't too happy with what he was doing. I began the next day by placing down a build for where my new house would go. This would allow the colonists to have a home, and they'd be happier and more willing to work. Then I began trading with more villagers. I really needed a book on how to get the Hades statue, because if I could not pay Hades tribute, there's no way I could go to the Nether and survive more than a day. So I maxed out villagers trading, trying to get different books, and trying to find my knowledge on Hades. Not only did maxing out the librarian give me another book, but it also gave me the ability to trade for Villager Bane 7. This meant that I could kill pillagers with extreme passion and sharpness and destroy them. It also gave me an infinity book, which would be very helpful for bows. Now it was time to delve into the new story. Apparently, if I killed an evoker with a silver sword, he would drop some sort of immortal item. This I needed, so I decided to venture out. Let's just pretend this clip didn't happen. After it didn't happen, I ventured out into the wild. I would need to find a pillager camp a good distance away, as I looted all the ones that were close. Whilst adventuring, a boss bar, the Iron Slime, came up, and I decided, well, how hard can this be? So I noticed the mine shaft right next to me, and I ventured down, hoping it would lead me to the slime. And sure enough, it did. I began attacking him with my pickaxe, because I believe this is the only way you can kill him. I was doing basically no damage, and he was absolutely obliterating me, so after some time I decided to valiantly retreat. I would come back for him later once I learned how to take him on. Apparently, you're supposed to be able to trade with some foreigner, and he enables you the knowledge to know how to defeat these types of bosses. So I guess a pickaxe is not enough. I'm going to have to find the foreigner and give him some items so that he'll give me the knowledge on how to defeat the Iron Slime. Day 51 was a big day. I found another pillager camp and I raided it. But unfortunately, there was no evoker to be found. Only the evoker would drop the item when killed with the silver sword, so I had to keep on looking. On day 52, I found a giant castle and I knew an evoker hid inside, so I went for it. I remember at the beginning of the game barely escaping here with my life, and now I was back taking it on. I killed all the mobs on the outside and I made my way up, only to realize I would need more fame to actually use the silver sword. Well, I guess that means we have to build up our colony, but I decided to keep going and see what was inside of the dungeon. At the top, there was the boss. I had never seen a massive man this big in Minecraft before. I took him on, and I was able to defeat him since he got stuck in the stairway. Ha! I began the next day by chopping down some more trees and gathering some resources. I wanted to begin expanding the colony, building guard towers, and becoming an empire. This would aid me a lot in the late game of this mod pack. The next day I began upgrading my house. I wanted it to be level 2 so that both of my builders would have a house and they would be happy. And then from there I made a diamond pickaxe with efficiency 3. I needed to accumulate a lot of cobblestone if I was going to begin expanding the colony, so I figured today would be the best day to do that. The next day I began construction on another builder's hut. I was going to begin building a ginormous empire, but to do that I was going to need multiple builders working at the same time. I continued that day gathering more resources. I finished my level 2 upgrade on the house, and I ended off the day by selecting the upgrade for the town center. I think I was done for the colony for a while. I was going to now start working on villagers and getting some more knowledge about the world. I really wanted to go to the Nether soon, but to do that, I would need to learn how. I spent the next 2 days gathering resources and leveling up my trades. I was trying to find how I would get the Statue of Hades, so that when I was in the Nether, I would not be attacked by everything in sight. There's a lot of dungeons and way better loot to find there, but I didn't want to die, so I kept leveling up villagers to try and find it, but to no avail. Eventually, though, a villager wanted a lightning dragon heart in exchange for a very rare item. I noticed that I actually had marked a lightning dragon from a long time ago in the early days. I thought it was cool, and it was the first lightning dragon I had ever seen, so I marked it. Thankfully, I knew where it was still, as I had left a marker there. Now, it was time to face my first dragon, and then get the rare epic item. I wasn't quite sure what it did, but it looked pretty pog. Before leaving, I wanted another building to be built, as it was quite a ways away to get to the lightning dragon, so I placed down a new watchtower. This would spawn in a guard that would begin guarding my colony, and as I upgraded him, more guards would appear that could wear better and use better tools to protect everybody inside of the colony. From there, I made some fire-resistant potions. I had never fought a lightning dragon before, but I would assume he was going to light me on fire, so it would be the best idea to craft these. I ended up crafting strength potions because I'm an idiot. But then I crafted the right potions, and now I had strength and fire resistance. That was totally planned, and then I ventured out. I'm pretty sure that my new crossbow could take on the lightning dragon, but I wasn't for sure. But you know what? One never knows until you try. After a few days of traveling, I arrived at the shorelines. I kept getting nausea from traveling by sea because Poseidon still hated me. Oh well. And then I approached the den that the lightning dragon held. It was indeed a lightning dragon, and I began attacking him. He wasn't doing too much to me as I stayed my distance, but I made the fatal mistake of getting too close, and lightning rained down upon me. But it was okay because I backed off and began shooting him again and again. And eventually, when he was low, I went in on melee to finish him off. A courageous death for an amazing looking dragon. and I got his heart, which I can now trade for the Dragon Slayer item. I wasn't quite sure what this item did, but I was hoping it was going to unlock some sort of knowledge. I investigated the roost that he was on to see if any treasures lay within, but it was just miscellaneous items. I took a few of them, but I left most of it behind. And then I arrived back at the village, and I claimed my prize. After receiving the item, I had no idea what to do with it. I attempted to equip it, but turns out it's actually a consumable item. It gave me the effect the villagers loved me now. I have no idea what this does. I'm assuming it gives me better trades, but that was sort of anticlimactic. When I returned home, my guard tower had finished. I gave my new guard a sword so he could begin guarding the realm. This was going to be super exciting, because soon I can have an entire army guarding this base. I then began scouting for another village as I had run out of villagers. I knew villagers were the key to unlocking the knowledge to get into the Nether and for Hades not to hate me. So, I ventured off to a new village. The first villager I traded with gave me a book right off the bat. This let me know who all the legends were inside of the game. This was going to be very useful because I assumed once I had killed enough of the legends, I was going to get some sort of item that would help me in finding the end portal. The next day, while trading with a villager, I learned that I had to find 3 Nether temples to unlock the statues of Hades. I guess we're going to the Nether, boys. I began the next day by upgrading my builder huts. Once these were tier 3, I'd be able to make way better buildings and begin advancing civilization. And then, I ventured into the Nether. I had no idea what awaited me down here, but I knew it was not going to be easy. Whilst I ventured through the Nether, I bumped into this big boy. He began spitting out blue fire at me, but thankfully, because I had fire resistance on, he wasn't able to do a lot. Should I not have this potion on right now, I would have died probably instantly. I wasn't able to attack him by bow though, and getting too close, I knew would be a mistake, so I decided to venture on and leave him alone. I then found the ultimate Ampusa. I did not like the fact that this thing existed, and I did my very best to eradicate it. Eventually, I took her down, and I looted the chests. These mobs were absolutely insane, and the worst part is you don't naturally regen when you're in the Nether, meaning you have to eat golden apples to gain your hearts back. I then found another big boy, but apparently shooting him with a bow once again still did nothing, and I decided to leave him alone once again. I think I learned my lesson. I then stumbled upon another temple. I was wondering if these were one of the 3 temples I would have to discover to find Hades, but when I went inside, nothing happened, and as I opened the chest, an explosion occurred and blew up all of the items. It was a trap chest. I had to be more careful next time because should I be in the middle of that explosion, and it might not end too well for me. Whilst exploring some more, I found another fortress, which inside had some epic items inside of the chests. Some of them were baubles, some of them were better gear. I couldn't use all of it though, as I still needed to level up my fame. I still wasn't sure how to do this. I was pretty sure if I leveled up my colony, then I would grow fame from there. But for now, I would keep the items in my backlog for the ones I could not use. Whilst exploring the next day, I stumbled upon a giant reactor-like object. I'm not quite sure what they're doing down here in the depths, but I'm not sure if I like it. When I went to loot the chests, it gave me a radiation shield, which blocks radiation. I have no idea who even admits radiation, but I took it just in case. Day 69. I stumbled upon a temple-like object once again, but it was slightly different than the other temple. I was hoping that this might be the one that would unlock Hades, but unfortunately, it was not. But I still decided to go in and see what loot it had to offer. There was a ton of golden blocks, but some infernal blaze that were protecting it. Thankfully, I still had fire protection with me, and I was able to withstand their blow. I also had some armor with fire protection on it as well that I noticed later that was helping me out quite a bit. Inside one of the chests, there was a Fire Aspect 1 Sharpness 8 Blaze Rod. I don't know if this is going to be useful, but I'm hoping maybe I can disenchant it and use the book on another weapon. I began the next day by construction on a university. This would allow me to research new topics, advance my empire, and allow my men to be smarter and able to be upgraded to higher tiers. I wanted to begin taking down that Japanese structure that we had seen earlier, that ginormous dungeon, so I began enchanting. I wasn't sure what was in there, but I wanted to put my villager's bane onto my axe. I then made my bow a little bit better and ventured out. Whilst on my way to the structure, I was attacked by wild demon dogs. I thought this was the best time to try out my new blaze rod and to see how well it did. For an item that does no damage without enchant, it actually did pretty well against them. It 3-shotted most of them. However, I wasn't sure how powerful a sword would have done, so I'm not sure how good that was. Whilst traveling, I was informed that I've reached peak physicality. I already knew that one. I then found the giant structure that I had seen from earlier, and I plunged inside. It was time to take it on. I found items on the floor, but no mobs yet. I wasn't quite sure what was going on. But sure enough, it was guarded by some of the evilest, darkest creatures I had ever seen. This man was walking on the ceiling, shooting me with a bow and arrow. I'm not quite sure what his deal was, but I did not like it. Floor after floor, mob after mob, spawner after spawner. This tower was getting smaller and smaller as I was getting closer to the top. I could taste victory in my mouth. It was either that or all the blood that I'd accidentally been consuming from killing everybody. I then accidentally lit the entire structure on fire. This was now a ticking time bomb, and I had to get to the top as soon as possible, because as soon as too much of this was lit up, it would cause way too much lag and I wouldn't be able to stay in the space. There was no stopping it now, though. I had to make my way to the top as fast as I could. I made my way up the floors as quick as possible, running by spawners, completely ignoring the mobs that were in my way, and then I arrived at the top. I killed the mobs that stood their ground. I eradicated them from existence. And then I began looting the chests. There was some pretty pog loot, a lot of ores, a lot of rare materials, enchanted books. This was going to set me up nicely because next, we were going to have to fight some of the bosses in the game. And I was going to need to be prepared. There was a village beneath the behemoth structure, and I decided to go and see if there were any unique villagers there than I had dealt with before. I really needed some more books on the lore of this mod pack if I wanted to face some of the bosses by the end of the 100 days. So I did a bunch of trading with them to try and find out if I could discover more about how to summon these ancient horrors. I then made my way into a roguelike dungeon. These things had been reworked for 1.16, and I knew there were many dangerous beings and great loot to be had. So I ventured in. On the top floors I encountered some resistance, but they were pretty weak to my blows. The loot was okay, but I knew as we got down farther and farther, they would grow stronger and the loot would grow better. I then plunged my way down to the bottom floor. This floor had the best loot, but also the strongest mobs that would try and protect it with their undead lives. So I had to chop my way through them. I also found this cool iron golem totem. Every time I right-clicked it on the ground, it would spawn an iron golem. This thing is so cool. I continued to venture through the dungeon, and then I made it to the final room. I wasn't met with much resistance, as at this point I was pretty overpowered. I collected all of the resources in the chests. These are some amazing resources, and I was going to need them if I was going to begin taking on the final bosses in the upcoming next few days. I arrived home the next day, sorted all of my items away, and then walked around the town and made sure everything was still working just right. Before I ventured out to the Nether, I wanted to make sure the town was doing okay. It was finally time. All the preparation, all of the work. We could now begin building our way through the storyline and taking on the bosses. But the first boss required another star to spawn him. And to get another star, we would need to kill a wither. So I ventured into the Nether to collect wither skeleton skulls so I could spawn one in. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to take one on with the armor I had, but I knew I had no other choice. After collecting the wither skulls, I returned home and I began enchanting some of my items. If I was going to take on the wither, I was going to need the strongest gear I could make. So I went through my enchanted books, applied everything I could to my bow and sword, and then ventured into the darkest part of the mines to spawn this demon in. After clearing out a small area, I placed down the soul sand that kept souls from the past. I placed my wither skeleton skulls atop, and the fight was ready to start. As the wither gained more health, he prepared to fight me, but I was overprepared, and I was going to defeat him. And then, the battle broke out. The battle was fierce. The wither was a very strong mob inside of this game, and because he withered my hearts, I had no idea how much health I had. All I could do was cross my fingers and swing my sword and shoot my bow. I backed up and shot, went forward and shot, and backed up and went shot. And I wanted to make sure I was staying out of his range, while still doing the most damage I could. And then eventually, I brought him down, and I gathered his nether star. I then threw down redstone, rotten flesh, and the nether star, and I constructed an undead heart. This evil item, when applied to a zombie, would turn it into a ravaging beast. But it was the first mini-boss I would need to fight to get my way to the end of this mod pack. I then ventured down into the mines as I needed to find a zombie. Once I gave him the undead heart, he would become a titan of a boss, and I could begin fighting him as my first step towards defeating the Ender Dragon. I gave him the heart, and he became the scariest creature I've ever seen in my life, and the battle commenced. Upon killing him, he dropped his heart once again, and now this heart would give me a buff against all the undead creatures in the world. This was my first step toward world dominance. After defeating that zombified monster, I returned home and I placed my new items back in the chest. I had gathered a withered eye from killing the wither. This was one of the 9 eyes I would need to kill the Ender Dragon and enter his portal. From here, it was time to begin taking on the legends, as I had learned that once I killed them, I'd have enough fame to start using the better weapons inside of the game. So I opened my book up, and I began adventuring. The next day, I found the first legendary mob I was going to take on, Barako, the Sun Chief. I knew this man was incredibly strong, so I had to be very careful. He spawned in minions that did a lot of damage, and if I was hit by one of his beams, I would be in a lot of pain very quickly. But after some cautious striking, going in and out, and running around for my life, I was able to take him down and bring him to his knees. And then, he gave me the mask that only the Sun Chief can wear, and now I can order his minions around. This was 2 legends down, 4 to go. The next day I ventured to the mountains to find a Naga. I assumed he had to spawn during the day, so I waited until daylight approached. Whilst waiting around for the Naga to spawn, I saw a small castle and I invaded it. It was filled with pillagers and TNT. I dismembered them with my axe, and then I collected the TNT. And then I began my search for the Naga. But then I realized he actually spawns at nighttime. So I waited until the night, and then I saw him. To bring him down to the earth, I needed to shoot him with a bow. And then once he was brought down, I could smack him with my sword. But I decided just to use my bow the entire time, and I destroyed him. 3 legends down, 3 to go. I then began my venture to the nearest swampland. These lands held the Hydra, another legendary boss I would need to defeat if I wanted to reach the endgame. And then, while venturing into the swampland, I saw the Hydra's lair. As I approached it, he was not inside, but when I looked around, I saw him, and I stood toe to toe, if toes were very long anyway, with him, and I began the battle. It was a fearsome fight on both ends. To keep the Hydra from regenerating and growing more heads, you must light it ablaze. So I used flint and steel to keep it on fire, but sometimes the fire went out, and I had to quickly light him on fire again, or he would regenerate all of his health. The battle, though lasted a long time, ended in his defeat. I then began my journey to the snowy mountains, inside of which the Frost Gnaw was held. He was the second strongest and second last legendary I needed to take out. The battle began. He was definitely the toughest boss I had fought yet. I wasn't sure if I was going to survive. As he fell off the cliff, I began raining arrows down upon him in a fiery blaze. but it was barely doing any damage. I knew if I wanted to fight him, I must go toe-to-toe. So I left the mountaintop, I left my security behind, drew my sword, and the battle became even more furious. But in the end, I slayed him down, and he was defeated. Now, only one legendary remained, the Rotnot Knight. After days and days of searching coming up empty, I discovered that he was turned off in the configs and he would not spawn. So I turned him back on, and there he was, standing toe-to-toe with the most furious warrior out there, myself. And then, the battle commenced. This was the toughest battle I've ever faced inside of modded Minecraft. This boss is insanely tough, because if he hits me once, I die. I only have one opportunity to hit him, and that's after he does a giant swing. I have to wrap around and hit him in the back, and I only get one strike. I have to be flawless for about 10 minutes straight. If I make one mistake, he will end me. I then traveled to the lost city that we had seen many days prior, the one that had chased me out at the start of the game and said I was too weak to enter. Well, now I was back, and I was ready for vengeance to how they treated me. I began by stealing all the items from their houses. It was quite pog. And then I noticed a ginormous structure in the distance. I wanted it, and I wanted everything inside, so I invaded it. The illagers inside began shooting me with fireworks from their crossbows, but little did they know that I had Illager Bane 8 on my axe, and I sliced through them like a hot knife through butter. I realized that none of the zombies were attacking me, and then I understood why. The heart that I had gained from killing the evolved zombie kept everybody at bay. They were scared of me, as they should be. As I worked my way up floor by floor, I collected all the loot inside. There were some really good enchanted items, and I knew I could make something pog with everything that I was getting from this looting trip. I finally found some heart canisters. I can now get myself back to max HP. And then, after many floors, many arrows to the kneecap, I arrived on the top. There was some crazy loot inside, but I also noticed something odd about one of the chests. It had a red ring around the opening. This only meant one thing. It was a trapped chest. And when I explored why it was a trapped chest, sure enough, there is TNT behind it. They wouldn't fool me that easily. Put the tower to get back home. When I arrived home, I saw this speedy man that was running around, but he didn't seem to be causing any problems, so I let him be. As the sun set on day 100, I could only think that we were partway through our journey, and the end was soon to come. But to get there, we would need to collect many more Ender Eyes in another 100 days.